this is Board Game Design 101. I am Bez. And before I proceed, I'd like to say, who here has heard Mark Rosewater's 20 Lessons, 20 Years show? Okay, one person. So everyone else,
Get on again and go.
I'm not going to say that because Mark Rosewater isn't quite here and I'm live, and hopefully, there's a little bit of value in watching someone live, because frankly, otherwise you'd be watching everything on YouTube. But if you value this thing and presumably are interested in board game design, watch that afterwards. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then yeah, frankly, watch that instead. I'm going to be honest. I mean, maybe I'm not going to be as good as Mark Rosewater, but hopefully you listen to this, learn stuff. Anyway, pardon?
The more perspectives, the better.
Absolutely. So, who am I? I am a collection of atoms, just like everyone else. I love games. Originally, I wanted to be a video game designer. I studied computer games technology at Aberdeen, and I thought that was going to be my path, but then eventually I went down to board games. And generally, I love games, dancing, sensory play, music, performance, and comics. Those are some things that I love. I did 24-hour comics, so why did I choose board games? Well, basically because they're more realistic for one person to do. If you want to do video game design, even with a Flash game, you need to do some programming. I was told to avoid swearing. I'm going to just... So you need to do a bacon lot of programming, and bacons me off, all this programming. So, anyway, so it means that if all you want to do is the design, you can do it with a board game. You don't need programming. Hell, you don't even need artwork. You can just have stick figures. You can have whatever. As a player, there's greater interpersonal connection. As I said, no programming required, and it can allow for different play. So this is a bit about me. So I made a few board games in Glasgow, didn't have any playtesters, came to London in 2012. Playtest UK, who knows Playtest UK? So if you don't know it, look it up, meetup.com/playtest. That's a great way to find playtesters. In 2013, I eventually came up with the idea of In a Bind, I would say, and summer 2014 ran it. Some people asked me if they could publish it, and I said no. I wanted to go through that struggle myself. I wanted to learn the process, and eventually my friend at Essen 2015 showed it off to Gigamic and Ravensburger. I went with Gigamic. They've sold quite a bunch of copies. I've done Wibble++, and I'm fortunate enough to be paid an hourly wage by Alicat Games, who make Dice Hospital and stuff, and I've been doing developmental work for a bunch of their things. And there's going to be a new game every year, so my next few games are going to be Kitty Cataclysm Plus, and a game where a new bladder, a Scottish Roman to talk at length for the fast rate of announced. I'm not going to say the full title. So, question is, who are you? So, who here has designed a game? So, who here has showed their game to other people? Good. Who here is keen to design a game? Okay, so for the people who don't want to design a game, this isn't like an accusation, genuinely, just so I can get a sense of who you are and what to skim over a bit more. Why are you here, and what would you like to hear in this talk? Can I get a few shouts out, answers, or?
I'm here because I'm one of the people that get shown the new games very early on, so I'd like to know how to be more constructive, how to get more ideas.
As a playtester, okay, yeah. So you want to learn to be a better playtester, and
yeah.
Cool. Any other?
I'm just very curious.
Okay, cool.
Curiosity. So.
Any
I
other?
like the inner workings of the game, so I like knowing the background, I like knowing the foundation and the structure behind them. I don't necessarily have the impetus to design, but I like the theory behind it.
Brilliant. I hope to definitely touch upon those two things. I'm not sure if I can, how much I'll be able to get to that, but I'll try. Anyway, so the question is, do you really want to design? Let's say you want to design. There's so much that you can do in a game. You might want to do the art, you might want to do the game development, which is different from the design itself. You've got the concept, the ideation stage, which I would say okay, this is what we're doing, the design, which is making it fun, working out what is fun about this thing, and then the development, which is, okay, let's make it publishable, let's work out exactly what numbers it should be. You've got product design. Maybe you want to work out how to make particular trays for cards to slide out of. Maybe you want to work out inserts. I mean, there is a lot of creativity that goes into these things. Like if you read the design of everyday things, there's so much thought that should go behind anything. Maybe you want to do project management or demoing, or maybe you want to do game design. That's, it's not got to be, I want to work with board games, that's got to be the thing I want to do. There's lots of other possibilities. So, what motivates you? For the people who want to design, who wants money? Who wants fame? I'm going to be on. So, adoring fans, validation. Okay, a few more. Who wants to have their name on a box? Who wants to improve other people's mental health and kind of do some good in the world? Okay, that's good. Who wants to communicate a message? Who feels like they want to say something to somebody else? Who wants to just do it as an intellectual exercise to see if you can do it? Who wants to make a gift just for one person to say, hey, here's a really cool thing, and maybe you really love dogs, here's a reskin of cribbage, just with loads of dogs. Who wants to do that kind of thing?
Sure.
Who wants to make 1 million people happy? Who wants to do it? So basically, aims determine best practices, and this is a common theme in life. Whatever you want to do, if once you've worked out what you want to do, then you're more likely to actually be able to do it. And it's something so often that we blindly wander through, we're not sure what we're trying to do, and then maybe you do something good, maybe you don't, maybe you'll stumble upon something good, and maybe you can work out something with introspection. Oh, this worked out better than that. But just by saying, okay, this is what I really want to do, you can do it. But remember, whatever the hell you want to do is okay. So as a designer, toolkit, what I say is get some paper. You don't need to start off with real cards. When you make your first prototype, you don't need to make it look good. It really doesn't matter. Do not make it look good unless doing the art is your hobby. If that is your hobby, then fine, do all the art. But if game design is what you want to do, don't feel like you want to make the art because then you'll have to throw it away. Anyway, just write it on bits of paper. I don't even use blank cards for most of my prototypes. In a bind, the first version, it wasn't even on blank cards because it was like, no, that's too expensive, a penny per card. And so at that stage, it was like, okay, 1/16 of a bit of paper, fold it up, use cheap games that I've gotten for like £1 for 300. You can buy really cheap games if you look at discounted stuff, like Static Games in Glasgow and stuff like that. KentandCleo.co.uk when you want. I mean, at this point, if you have a little bit of cash, if you've got like £30 in your pocket or 10 quid on your pocket, that's the best website. And yeah, get a bunch of cheap cards. Spielmaterial.de is also good. So, not many people raised their hand for this, so I'm going to skim past it. But basically, yeah, is it realistic to make money in this business? Absolutely. You need to make a mass market game. You need to make a very particular kind of game. If you want to make something like Phil Eklund makes, if you want to make things that are about really expressing yourself, if you want to make games that are valuable, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll make money. If you want to make money, the best way to do that is to appeal to the common lowest denominator. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Yogi and In a Bind, they appeal to the lowest common denominator. I'm proud of them, but not everything of mine is going to be that way, and it doesn't mean that you... So, as a designer, Dice Hospital, I shouldn't say that, but so a good quality game that's got, let's say, 2,500 backers on Kickstarter, you're likely to get paid for about 1 year of rent. That's likely to give you that amount of wage. It's likely to support you very minimally. So if your things are humbled and you can't support yourself, it's up to you. As I said, I'm going to skim past it, and I've already talked too much about that. In pricing, Does everyone know this? Okay, so if there's a £10 game, shops buy it for 50%, distributors buy it for 37.5%, and so basically what you want to do is basically produce it for about 20% of the cost, so that within that £1.75, that's basically what pays for your postage costs, your time going to conventions, your all the years that you spend on it. If you're paying for any art, it helps pay for that. It basically, at the end, if you sell out with In a Bind, it took me to selling 2.7 thousand before I was back in the black, just to let you know. So even if you do most of this stuff yourself, it still takes time. So peripheral stuff matters. The sad fact is that designing, it's not the most important thing to what sells a game. The most important thing to what sells a game, I'm being honest, is the marketing. That's just the state of affairs. And there's a whole bunch of things like the organisation of time. That's actually really important to a designer. You've got to manage yourself if you're working and then you come back. You've got to manage your energy levels. You've got to think about what you're doing. And I'm not going to go into the whole Kickstarter and all that. So these are things that I'm not going to cover. But remember, whatever you want to do is okay. Whether you want to publish or self-publish or pitch, do whatever you want. Because it doesn't matter whether you want to make one bespoke game for one person. That's a really valid thing to do. That's just as valid as making a game that sells millions. So, let's talk about the phases of a game. So, I've got the concept. Let's work out what I'm making. So, in the case of In a Bind, by the way, who here has played In a Bind or Yogi? Okay, so my game In a Bind, it's a super simple game where you've got cards that say things like one finger touching nose, one finger touching ear, two hands touching, this card on top of your head, hands on the knee, and you still need to draw your next card. So that is the game. So the concept for this game was basically, it started off from a completely different place, and eventually after about 1 month-ish, I realised, okay, what I'm making isn't this game that's a bit like Flux, but it's got this one physical component, or this game that's got singing and sit-ups in it, or running around the table. It's actually just about the contortion, and that is the good part, and that's what I'm making. That is what I'm making. So to me, that is what the concept was. Then the design was spending the better part of a year working out, okay, what are good cards? Let's make some stuff, let's see what works. And for a more complicated game, for Magic the Gathering, for example, that might be, let's make a set that works. For Terraforming Bards, by the end of design, it should be a game that you can pitch to a publisher, that it's like, okay, this is a game, I'm having fun with it, my playtesters are having fun with it, everybody's having a good time, they want to play again. But maybe it's not quite as good as it could be. Then you've got development, which is maximize the fun, make it publishable. This is quite often something that publishers do if they take it on. I might be looking at something of, okay, are these numbers correct? Maybe even, shall we scrap this entire mechanism? Shall we put in something different? Because for Coral Islands, if anyone knows it from ACG, there was a part of the game that was totally irrelevant. And at the start, when it was submitted, it was all about seeing what's on top, and it wasn't about making the shapes at all. It was only in development that Brett Gilbert moved into making the shapes. So who here knows Coral? Anyway, the point is that games can totally change, and during development it can go, things need to be designed, but it's all about maximizing that fun and making it the best possible version of the vision that it can be. And then production is actually, assuming you want to make it mass-produced, that's production. But if it's for a bespoke thing for one person, then obviously that's you handcrafting it out of wood, potentially. Because as we say, whatever you want to do is okay. So, the key thing in a game is think about the player. Like, who are they? And what emotions do you want to elicit? So, too often people will say, okay, this is a bad game, or this is a good game, whereas it's really about this is a good game because of this experience that it elicits. It comes back to simplicity. Simplicity can be a great thing, but in certain games, it can be a terrible thing. Like, some games don't want simplicity. If you took Agricola and stripped out half of it, yes, it would be a better game for a particular audience, but it would be a worse game for that audience. Because that audience, I love Agricola. I want to sometimes play a really meaty game where my people are starving and where I'm having turmoil and I'm thinking, oh my god, what's happening to all these people? How am I going to feed them? And that's a really nice challenge to have. And so it's all about, do you want your people to feel stressed? Do you want them to feel happy? Do you want them to laugh? Do you want them to feel sad? I mean, there's not many games nowadays that make people sad, but we've got Holding On coming out, which is fantastic. And then we've got games that maybe it's about what experience you want to listen. That's the key thing, to keep in your player in your mind. And Gil Hova, creator of Wordsy, amazing person, incentivize interesting behaviour. The point being, find out what's interesting about your game. The key thing is, what is interesting? And as a playtester, coming back to one person who asked, the key thing I want to know from a playtester is what was good. Because what do you wish was different? What did you actually enjoy? And what is the bit that I should cut into? And almost everything else can be stripped out. Because in Magic the Gathering, I mean, they used to have big monsters. And then playing with big monsters used to be a terrible idea. Because if you did it, you were a ninny. And why would you do that? Because you play with all the good spells. And so now they've realised, hey, playing with big monsters is really cool, and playing with enchantments is really cool. So let's actually make that the correct way to play. Let's make it so that people have fun, so that the correct behaviour is the fun behaviour. Because whatever you incentivise, people will do that. And if you say in a game, you get a point for every time you bang your head against the wall, people will do that if they're trying to win. And then they'll tell you rightly, this is a terrible game because I didn't have any fun. Even if you say, oh, you can also get half a point by eating a cake. Well, I get more points by banging my head against the wall. Yeah, too right. That's a terrible game design. I mean, it's extreme, but my point stands. And Gil Hova's point. So, when you start going to the concepting phase, restrictions breed creativity. You can make a game about literally anything. If you want a restriction, here's a game that I'd like to see. A game about literally burning things. You know, maybe you have like paper that's burnable. It should be some sort of legacy game. I don't know what you want to do with it, but someone take that idea and run. Anyway, so here's some more ideas for our first project. 55 cards. It's cheaper to produce. If you send that to a publisher, they're more likely to take it on. If you want to do it yourself, it's easier to do. Quick 15-minute game. Something testable with 2 or even 1 players. These are very pragmatic things, because the faster a game is, the more you can playtest it. So if you want to make a solo game, when I actually made my first solo game for the Wibble++ deck, I was like, wow, I can play this on my own, like just spend an entire day on it. Whereas if I want to playtest Yogi 2, which is like a 4+ player game, I need to get 4 players together. Yes, I can do that, but then it's like kind of a bit of a favour, and you know, I need to organise things. It's more difficult. Obviously, it's the same as any game. The same reason that getting a solo game is easier, the same reason getting a 2-player game is easier. Anyway, if you want some restrictions, there you go, and those are very pragmatic ones. Burning things, honestly, I would be interested and excited to see someone make a game about literally burning things.
Reduce a game.
Pardon?
Reduce a game. We've got the game about burning London.
No, I mean literally burning things.
like
I don't mean thematically burning things.
Actually,
I mean actually, literally burning things.
That's a better idea.
I mean, I know that.
that's definitely a legacy game.
So I understand that publishers might have problems with it, but I know that there's at least one publisher that would be fine with it. Anyway, so it doesn't matter where you start, just that you start. Honestly, I made a game called Extendable that was inspired by hamburgers. I was like, okay, here's how you make a game, just come from a random idea. Let's think about hamburgers. And so hamburgers are, okay, they've got layers. And so maybe they spread out. Maybe it's about making big layers. Maybe the words, you make a 3-letter, then a 4-letter, then a 3-letter word. Maybe you need to spread it. Oh, that's quite an interesting idea, extending it slowly. And it doesn't matter, as long as you're willing to verge off from that initial concept and follow the fun, that's what matters. Just start somewhere. It doesn't matter where you start. Just start somewhere, get it down on paper, actually think it through. People talk about playtesting your ideas, and yes, playtest your ideas, but you can simulate lots of things if you actually sit down and really ponder hard. Whatever you want to do is okay, as long as everyone involved is of sound mind and consenting. So, as I say, playtest with real humans you don't know. I mean, who here feels that playtesting isn't important? Cool. So playtest faster. Use other games. If you want to make a drafting system, maybe incorporate that new drafting system into a game that already works, like Ticket to Ride. See if you can draft the ticket cards in an interesting way. Or maybe handwrites on paper, no art. You don't need to make all the cards. Remember that. You can make enough cards for the first 2 turns. Just set up the game, play the first 2 turns. Sometimes just playing those first 2 turns with other people will help you so much, because you'll notice things and understand things. When you actually get your game going, if you want to increase or lower something, just half it or double it or triple it. Don't be shimmying about up and down. And always be ready to try something wild. I mean, while you're at the ideation phase, even into the design phase, into the design phase of In a Bind, it was like, okay, what about vocal binds? Would this be an interesting game? And so I made a game that had no physicality in it at all, after I'd basically made 90% of In a Bind, and it was like, okay, let's just make a game where if someone says this word, other people need to say this word, and if people say that word, and it became a loop. And then there were kind of wee things going on. It wasn't a good game. It was basically about memory, but I tried it, I learned from it, and I learned more about In a Bind. And that's the point, that if you go off on this tangent, you will return with new knowledge, and that's always a good thing. It's never wasted time. So how to find playtesters? Go to meetup.com/playtest, that's the best way. When you've got something good that's been at least solo tested, then you can go to a gaming club, because it is an imposition going there with your brand new game and people are, oh, what is this? Sometimes, go to conventions, and Playtest UK is around. Like, Playtest UK is right there. Literally about 50 meters, 30 meters, I don't know. But, all these conventions, and then you can talk to a shop or board game cafe. You could try online, but realistically, until you've made something, it's going to be a bit of a struggle to actually get people to help you online. But anyway, here are some ideas. Hopefully it helps. So, don't be afraid to scrap everything. Some ideas are better than others. This is a sad fact. Like that vocal In a Bind, no physicality, 0 physicality, that's a terrible idea. And it could be made into a decent game, but it wouldn't ever be it would be like mediocre or interesting at best. I mean, why would you want to carry on working on that? And if you're working on something that's just derivative, maybe you want to just scrap half of it and just throw in something totally different. If you're working on something, something here is not quite working. Is it this half? Is it that half? Or is it this tiny bit? Just remove it, axe it, and just try it and see what happens. But at the same time, you don't need to change much to change a lot. So you need to sometimes change just one card, and it changes everything if that card is powerful. You can change one aspect of the game, change the drafting thing. Okay, so some changes are bigger, but you can make one change. Let's say changing a game to play for the lowest score. That's a wild idea. What would it be like if you did that? Change things one at a time sometimes to see if you can isolate what's really working, especially when you get into the development stage and you don't want to just you want to keep the essence of what is actually good. I hope I'm making some sense. Simplification. That's it. So can I have a volunteer? Okay, we're going to play rock, paper, scissors, Spock. Come up. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're going to throw rock, paper, scissors, lizards, or Spock.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's
a
easy.
draw, right?
Yep.
That's
We're
just
both having the same
That's
thing.
lizards.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Aha.
Okay, so scissors against Spock. Who wins?
That was paper
No,
when it
that's
started.
that's me trying to do Spock.
Okay, fair enough. I would suggest you won.
Okay, so who could tell that without looking at the chart? Okay, who could tell that by looking at the chart? Okay, thank you very much. That's basically the whole thing. So basically, my point is, rock, paper, scissors, it's simplicity, but it's good. And there's a reason that it works well. There's a reason that rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock hasn't taken the world by storm, because more isn't necessarily better. What is the focus? Whatever your focus is okay. Whether it's contorting yourself, or whether it's starving your victims, or whether it's bombing millions of people, or whether it's a Cold War and you're trying to be ultra-realistic simulation, or you're trying to historically simulate this battle of Napoleon conquest, whatever you're trying to do, that's fine, but pick your focus, because everything else needs to be subservient to that. And if you're trying to get some Napoleon conquests really simulated, then sure, you might have to have a lot of lookup tables, but it has to be serving the focus, if that makes sense. Again, simplify as much as you can. It's focus that matters, not simplicity. Complexity is okay, but please be mindful of it. Please be mindful that complexity should be serving some purpose. Every rule needs to be worth its weight, because every rule, even if it's a tiny thing that you don't think, oh, this isn't going to matter, every rule is something extra that we have to think about. And every rule is something that we might forget. And that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. So it's not fine to say, oh, that's fine, everyone can remember that. My mum has no trouble remembering that. Well, who cares? It's like, if a playtester is telling you that something's a problem, like, don't even talk back to them, frankly. So let's talk about feedback loops. Who knows what a feedback loop is? Okay, so for those of you who aren't aware, positive feedback loops, sometimes called intensifying feedback loops, basically intensify what's going on in a system. So if someone's further ahead, they will be pulled further ahead. This might be the case in an engine building game. For example, as you've got more stuff, you get more stuff. If you've got more workers in Agricola, you're likely to be able to get more workers. This is a positive feedback loop. Now, negative feedback loops. Negative feedback loops are things that bring it back to an equilibrium. So negative feedback loops might be something wherein we say, okay, the person in the lead, they lose this many points. It might be something a bit more subtle. It might be something like saying, okay, you need to pay a bit of tax. That's still a bit out there. It might be more subtle still. So I'd like someone to come up to play a quick game with me. Can we have a volunteer? Anyone?
I'm willing to come again. If
Sure.
response.
Okay, so this is a version of my game. This is not the actual rules. So what we're going to do is shout a word. So these cards, for anyone who can't see, they have 2 letters on them. We're going to shout a word that contains one of these letters and one of these letters. Cow. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I could have also said caw or world. So I take both cards.
Right, so any
Any word.
word that contains at least one letter from each of the cards.
Correct. Nerd.
Nice.
Han.
He's very good at it.
C. It's a speed game, you can play when you want.
Yeah.
Quiz. International.
Nope.
Sorry, did you say?
I said hate, that didn't work actually.
No, hate doesn't
I
work.
have nothing there.
Ben.
Bananas.
Yes, you scored. Well done.
Hey.
Hurt.
Haribo. You're first.
Sick. So, let me ask you, how did it feel? Did you feel like you had a chance?
No.
Okay. So hopefully that was clear to everyone that the point is that I'm better. There is 0 feedback loops at all in that system. I'm not going to get, well, we might get better with practice. And sorry, what's your name?
Dominic.
Dominic, thank you very much. So Dominic is probably going to get better because that's the first time I believe you've played that sort of thing. And so that's why you eventually won a card. You know, maybe if you played through the deck, you might win a couple more times. But every time it's like loss after loss after loss. And it's like the game's saying, yeah. Yeah, it's like it's saying, why are you even playing? And so, feedback loops. So let's talk about negative feedback loops. Because negative feedback loops are important. So you've got catch up. Catch up is something where you're saying the person behind, they get some benefit. So catch up is like saying, okay, you get some extra money for being behind. Or, okay, if you're behind, the extreme example is in Power Grid, where if you're further behind, you get extra picks and stuff, but then that becomes such a strong negative feedback loop that actually when you're in first place, it stops you from wanting to power your stuff, so it changes the entire feeling of the game. You've got punishment, actually punishing the player in front, and you've got headwind, which is not a feedback loop at all, but it can feel like a feedback loop. For example, Dominion, when you go through and collect all the provinces, I think they're called, the ones that get VPs, and so when you get them and they're clogging up your deck, and it's like, oh my god, I'm going slower, and then you might think, oh, I'm catching up to this person. It feels like you're catching up, but this headwind is something that everyone needs to go through. Okay. So, randomness. Let's talk about randomness. So, who's heard of rando chess? So, Richard Garfield made this point of, imagine chess. Imagine we play chess, at the end, we roll a d6, person who if we get to 6, loser wins and the winner loses. And so, imagine that game for a second. Who thinks it has more skill than chess? Who thinks it has less skill than chess? Okay, interesting. Because if you think about it, it doesn't have any less skill. Because all the strategies that you would apply to real chess also apply to rando chess. Because all the things that you would do to maximize to get a 100% victory in chess, yeah, they only get you a 5-6 chance of victory, but you're still doing all those same things. So it's not one or the other. So it is unrelated to skill, please believe me. And so what are the benefits of randomness? Because as game designers, sometimes people shy away from randomness, and that's not the way to go. We can't just be scared of it. It's not a beast. It's something to embrace and love. And it adds drama. Sometimes it's like, whoa, this thing happened. It's crazy. I can't believe it. And sometimes there's a possibility to win. Oh my God, they're winning. But, oh, if I get this D20 comes up a natural 20, and then I get this exploding dice where if it's a 20 you can keep rolling, then I can still win. Sometimes it adds variance because, oh, there's all these things that have been laid out in a different way, and this game's different. Maybe this order of cards is different. It's actually adds skill, because in poker you need to think about the randomness, and that's an extra thing that you need to consider. So, concepts again, some ideas are better than others. Have I already explained that enough, I think? Mechanisms are tools. Who's happy with this? So basically, My point is that mechanisms are not what your game is. Your game is not a worker placement game. Agricola is not just a worker placement game. Agricola is a game about building up a farm and trying to get the most people you can and working hard, and then eventually you try to manage to feed them all, and you come out on the other end feeling, yes, I can finally survive and things are doing okay, finally. I'm happy with where I am. And it's that mixture of relief and tension and anxiety, and mechanisms are tools to give you, to let you deliver that to people. Let's talk about fun. What is fun? I think it's agency. If I say, roll a die, for a wee kid, that's fun. They feel like they've had control. They might feel like Snakes and Ladders is fun. For us, that illusion of control is pretty much gone at some point. Maybe people feel like fun is a surprise. I mean, maybe it's like throwing a thing and seeing where it goes. I mean, just seeing, you know, I don't know exactly where this is going to go. And this is why I'm doing this, honestly. Maybe it's seeing things in a new way. Maybe it's, wow, I didn't realise that I could really hit the wall from over here. And maybe it's safety and comfort. Maybe it's knowing, okay, I'm not going to hit anyone with these beer mats. And that's why I'm not throwing it over there. Because maybe, you know, you'd feel a bit, who was actually feeling a bit uncomfortable with me? Okay. Who's feeling uncomfortable with me doing this? Okay, that's good. Anyway, so it's safety, it's comfort. You know, it's about, for some people, fun is being able to communicate, having those rules, and being able to know, okay, I'm not going to overstep the social boundaries because I'm allowed to speak in this very constrained way. And maybe it's knowing that, okay, I don't need to think about what the social rules of engagements are. I'm just going to follow the rules of this game, and that is what I'm doing, what I'm focusing on. And so fun, it's maybe like films. Films, if you look at them, it's... So you set your tone, then there's a surprise, and then there's completion. So you've got to have some surprise in there. You've got to have something unexpected. You can't just know exactly what's going to happen in a game for it to be truly fun. What does your game bring to the world? So of those people who wanted to design a game, can you hold your hands up? Who here thinks about, keep your hands up, or put your hands down if you think about theme first. Put your hands down if you think about mechanics first. So maybe you want to think about the experience, because it's not about the theme or the mechanics. It's, again, these are the tools. It's not about my game is a zombie game. It's about, like, my game is a game where we're starting to not really trust each other because of the zombies. The zombies are a backdrop in Dead
of Winter.
Thank you, Dead of Winter. So Dead of Winter, it's a zombie game, but it's brilliant. And whereas you've got a zombie game like Zombies, ! Which is, okay, in this game we're going around blasting people and we feel like we're just running around, it's mayhem. That's the experience, it's meant to be roll dice. That game, in my humble opinion, would be a bit better if it were shorter, but, you know. Anyway, who is your audience? Again, it's all about the experience. So, in Magic the Gathering, they've got Timmy, Johnny, and Spike as a psychographic. Who understands the word psychographics? So a psychographic is kind of like basically saying, this is a type of player or a person that we're considering, and let's consider making our thing for this person. And so let's consider Timmy. Timmy is a little boy, and maybe Timmy really likes playing with big creatures, and Timmy just likes playing for the experience. And sometimes Timmy wants to, you know, go off, and Timmy's all about the experience. But maybe Johnny wants to maybe express themselves a bit. And Johnny likes building decks and being clever. Johnny doesn't need to win all the time, but Johnny needs to win on their own terms. And Spike's all about, thinking about how they could do better, what mistakes they made, doing the tournament scene. Then there's Bartel, who did the psychographics of the Achievers, Explorers, Socializers, and Killers. This is mainly Bartel, just for the record. Bartel worked with Morpgus, massively multiplayer online RPGs. And that makes a bit more sense, but all these things can be translated to other things. Whether it's for CCGs or whatever, you can transcribe it. It's all about different lenses to view game design through. And so you've got people who want to say, yeah, I'm brilliant at this game, I'm enjoying myself, I'm dominating this game. People are like, oh, let's see what happens if I do this thing in this game. People are like, oh, I'm enjoying myself with other people, and people are like, oh, I'm dominating other people. So it's about the dichotomy between exploration and domination and people and game world. So something to think about. And with playtesters, this is the design side, but always listen. Playtesters always talk, and sometimes as a designer, it is so tempting to defend your game. There was one time I heard an unnamed designer, someone said, oh, I couldn't do this, I felt I was just losing. And then they were like, oh, you're wrong because of X, Y, Z. And oh, this is why I did this. And then they went on almost to talk for 20 minutes. And it's like, you're stopping them from talking. You're discouraging them from contributing their opinion in future. And you're just not listening. I mean, it's not about correcting yourself or having the correct opinion. It's about sort of saying, okay, how can I make this better? And if a playtester, if you feel this game is too complicated, it is bloody well too complicated. And if, as a playtester, you feel couldn't win, it doesn't even matter what's the reality. It doesn't matter if you could do this crazy thing and win. It's a perception, because perception is reality. Again, what's the intended experience? Just think about it. But at the same time, nothing is ever perfect. And nothing is ever finished. So I'm really proud of Inabinds. And Yogi, it sold tens of thousands of units. It's done fairly well. And I said to them, okay, the cards that are right palm face down, after my 300th plate through at several conventions, I was like, oh, sometimes some people are misinterpreting that. Maybe if it was facing down, that would be a bit clearer. And then I said, oh, what, could you do this? And she was like, yeah, we'll do that in the next print run. A game is never finished. You can always change it for future prints runs. You can always change it for future editions. At some point, you just need to say, this isn't finished. My artwork, maybe it's a bit, some people won't like it, but for the next edition, okay, it could be totally different, whatever. And you've just got to put something out there, because something real is better than something nothing. Well, you know what I mean. And again, whatever you want to do is okay. So that's if you take one thing away from what I said, that's basically it. I mean, there are designers who will say, oh, you need to do this to be a real designer, or you need to do that to be a designer. And I'm going to say no. Bacon those people. Because to say that, oh, if you don't ascribe to this attribute, you're not a real designer, this sort of gatekeeping is totally not cool. And if you take a game and then you house rule it, in a way you are a designer. And if you take a game and then you're thinking, oh, maybe this magic card, maybe would it be better if I added 1 mana to it? You're a developer. I mean, you're thinking like a developer at least. And whatever you want to do is okay, but that's my talk, so thank you very much. So luckily, I've got a big clock over there, so I can see I've got like 15 minutes.
Yeah, we've got time. So if you're happy to field
Yeah,
some
so
questions.
please, any questions at this point? I intentionally tried to rush through this stuff. So if anyone's got stuff that they feel I didn't cover enough or have totally unrelated questions, please put your hands up and ask.
You mentioned. Oh yeah, actually me.
No, the person behind.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, I didn't say that. I was just. You go.
No, I had a question about because you mentioned before about tweaking stuff as you go, and you said multiply it or divide it by 2 or whatever. I guess I want to go a little bit deeper into that because if you have a mechanic that where dividing it or times it by 2 has like wider machinations in the game, so that's not possible. Is there like?
What do you mean by it has wider machinations?
So, well, I'm very explicitly thinking about becoming far too overpowered or starting a game far too underpowered in a game where you're supposed to kind of develop over time. So multiplying by 2 wouldn't work in the sense that you would just become instantly too powerful. So I guess my question or point of discussion is, do you have any advice for go into a bit more detail about how to tweak a game as you go? If you're playtesting and something's not quite working.
I understand your reluctance to make such a radical change, and quite often it might be the case that that's completely wrong. But in military terms, there's something that where they say, okay, let's say you're firing a projectile, like a large-scale ballistic projectile, and then you fire too far to the left. Your second shot better be too far to the right, and then you can narrow in far more easily. Because if you multiply it, let's say, by 1.2, maybe you're closer to the thing, but then could you increase it further? You keep inching forwards, and then you're never quite sure what you're doing. I mean, part of it is, so do you really understand all the ramifications of your game system as well as you think you do? And sometimes some of this is what works for me. Your understanding of things might be completely different, but quite often the answer is no. Because if, let's say, in Coral there was a system where we had an economy of fish, we had some points that you were getting for shapes, and we had some points that you were getting for looking at things on the top. And then it was like, okay, the shapes are the more interesting thing. Let's divide the bits at the top by 2 and let's see what happens. And then eventually we even scrapped that element. So that's probably... But in the case of a character or that you need to see progress and something that you need to start the game with, maybe it's still interesting as a niche card. Maybe it's good for later on in the game. I mean, maybe people still... I mean, I guess I'm trying to... Parts of me wants to challenge the assertion that multiplying or dividing it by such big swathes is a bad idea. And I understand it might not be for everyone, but it is, if you've not tried it, I always suggest it's worth considering at least.
Yeah,
I mean, I hope that answers your question.
I kind of get where you're coming from when you say more along the lines of, even if you know it might not work too well, try it, see where it doesn't work, and then narrow it down. That kind of makes sense. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? Josh?
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of different designers and developers throughout the presentation. Mark Rosewater is one that stuck out in my mind because I'm a Magic the Gathering player. I mean, are there any other particular designers that you admire and respect, and what are the reasons for that?
Okay, I would say Richard Garfield is like super awesome. I mean, I mentioned Rando Chess, which is Garfield's invention, and it's a terrible game. I mean, Garfield never invented it for anyone to play it. I don't think Garfield's played it himself. It's just a thought exercise. But it's really powerful. But as actual published games, if you look at Magic the Gathering, if you look at Vampire's Eternal Struggle, Masquerade Vitesse, yeah. If you look at Netrunner, if you look at King of Tokyo, if you look at Schizoid on the Xbox 360, it was a really good game. Who here has heard of Schizoid? It's a really good game, seriously. Who here has heard of Ikaruga? Okay, Schizoid is basically two-player Ikaruga. One player is one colour and they destroy one colours that are susceptible to the other, and one player is the opposite, and it becomes a puzzle game. And anyway, it's quite cool. Richard Garfield knows their stuff. And the other thing is the best podcast. If you listen to any podcasts for the sake of board game design, Games with Garfield is the best podcast, seriously. Like, it's finished like many years ago, but what's there is still perfectly relevant. And the thing about game design is that it's also about who is willing to share their stuff with other people, because it's all well and good making amazing games, and you can look at people like Sid Saxon who are baconing amazing, and Sid Saxon is remarkable but then you've got Gil Hova, who's comparatively not that good. I mean, no one's that good really compared to Sid Saxon. I mean, if we had like a top four would be, I don't know off the top of my head, Garfield, maybe Saxon, Knizia, Rainer Knizia, and Gary Gygax. Yeah, I think
sounds like a pretty solid top four.
I think that would be my in terms of people whose games I absolutely respect. That would be it, and that's for the games they produce. But at the same time, there are people like Gil Hova and who really share their wisdom with the world. And there's people like Phil Eklund. Phil Eklund is completely inaccessible. Who was here for the talk about accessibility? So, Phil Eklund is one of the most inaccessible designers ever. Like, it will take you literally like a day worth of effort to read through one of these instruction manuals. But these instruction manuals are all about the scientific, it's like almost hypothetical science. What would happen if this biology, like if the evolution of people happened in a slightly different way? And someone who's willing to stand up and make games that are a bit different like that, I respect that. And I respect, the designers of Holding On and Nyctophobia for daring to come up and do something different. And Holding On, that's pushing the boundaries of what games can be and really affecting us at the core. I mean, that's a really valuable thing to strive for, and it's about that thing that I mentioned of what is your game bringing to the world. I mean, it's okay to make you can make a good game by just mixing two things together and not thinking about it too much. You can make a very fine, like 5.5, 6 out of 10 game that I'll play and I'll think, yeah, this is good, I had fun. And, the people that I played it with were nice and I had a fun game, there was like really things working. But it's, what are you really trying to make people feel? What are you bringing to them? I mean, because there are, and I don't want to hamper anyone from being a game designer because it would be super hypocritical of me to do so. But think about the fact that there were like 4,000 games-ish released in the last year. And so what is your game doing that's a bit different? And yeah, a lot of Knizia's games at this point, some of them are better than others. Some of them might be selling a bit based on Knizia's name. And some things might sell on someone else's name. But there is quite often like a little gem of mathematical purity about Knizia's games and some mathematical loveliness. And are you able to do that as well as Knizia? Probably not. So, sorry. Any other questions or comments or things?
Yeah, so how when you're designing your games, how far do you go down the sort of concept route before you start actually getting things made and started going, or did you work the whole
When
thing
you
out?
say starting getting things made, do you mean as in physically
Well,
prototype?
yeah, for play testing and stuff.
Oh no, when I talk about concept, I don't mean making a prototype means that you're beyond the concept phase. I make a prototype as early as you can. So play it, because once you've put it in front of people, you will probably be surprised. I mean, there are things where it's all about psychology, and honestly, like, the best thing that a designer can learn is human psychology. The best thing a designer can learn that I would love to improve myself upon is how to better analyze human behavior, and how to learn better to understand body language, and to read my playtesters, and to be able to say, okay, how are players going to behave in this way? And you can sort of simulate something in your mind and think, okay, if this person's lying to that, and then this happens, then that person, how upset are they going to be? How happy is this person going to be? You can think about that. And if you playtest it once, then yeah, this could be an anomaly. Maybe this person is really liable to being upset. Maybe this person's really non-susceptible or resilient to being upset by backstabbing. But you can learn so much and just confirm or help refute your worldview of your game, and just to see things being played. And sometimes for me personally, it helps to just start shifting things around. Even if I know, okay, I don't even have all the rules yet, I'm just going to start playing this game. Okay, what if we're trying to make we're doing a gin rummy style thing, and we're trying to make words. Okay, how interesting is this for me? Am I getting fed up? Okay, if I'm getting fed up, then probably someone else is going to get fed up. And it's, yeah, trying to playtest as quickly as you can. That is not the concept phase. The concept phase is almost, what are we doing? But playtesting is part of that research. It's like someone in product design told me that concept is, for them, the last step in the process, where it's research, and then which could be sitting on a bus, and then something you notice, I can't remember the official word for it, but it might be, oh, there's quite a divide between people on the top bus and people on the bottom. There's all these old people, maybe they want to come up to the top, and then there's a concept, oh, how about if we make some system to make it easier for older people to come up to the top of the bus? And then, but it's kind of that research, and then you might have to confirm your concept before you decide, okay, is this concept even worth proceeding with? And it's once you've play tested it and you're like, okay, this is genuinely good, then at that point I feel like I can confidently say, okay, this is now properly in the design phase. And for people, different people treat these labels differently, but that's how I approach it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else got anything quick? Well, thank you so much, everyone, and I hope that you got something from it. If there's something more broader, like how to be a better playtester, I'm going to be standing around. I mean, I think D100 one is...
Room D100 plus one is...
upstairs in the Yannick. Big room next to the bar.
So that's starting in half an hour. I'll be going up there to witness some of the hilarity. So if some people want to chat to me for the next half hour, I'll be happy to sit here and chat about whatever you want. So, but thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks, thank you very much, Bez. Be sure to check out Stuff by Bez's stand. You cannot miss it. It is the one that has a wall of cats behind it. So. Oh yeah, and everyone, just so you know, when I set up all the cats, it did take like 6 person-hours, but... We witnessed it. It took a long time.
Yeah, there were 2 of us, and it still took a hell of a long time. But we intentionally left a large gap, which we're hoping we can fill by the end of the convention.
So be sure to pop by to fill your cat quota for the weekend.
1 cat per person per day. That's his regime.
Thanks guys. Once again. Thank you.
Thank you.